Thank you for joining LIBOR today for this very important pre-recorded update on New York State's new fair housing regulations. These regulations were adopted to combat illegal discrimination in real estate. LIBOR strongly supports these regulations that help educate consumers on their rights and recognizes the importance of housing as central to the American dream. Here to present the new requirements and how to comply, as well as where to go if you have additional questions, are LIBOR's Corporate Counsel, Doreen Spagnuolo, and Associate Corporate Counsel, Patrick Fife.
Thank you, Tessa, and thank you everyone for joining us. Today we're going to speak about understanding New York State's new fair housing regulations. Please remember to visit LIBOR's Fair Housing Information Hub at lirealtor.com/fair housing. The New York State Department of State has enacted new fair housing regulations that go into effect on June 20th, 2020. All licensees need to be aware of these new requirements. Brokers are responsible to ensure that each licensed individual associated with the broker complies with the new fair housing regulations. What do the new regulations cover? New York State Housing and Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form, New York State Fair Housing Notice, and video recording and record preservation of fair housing real estate instruction. Here's a copy of the New York State Housing and Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form. Licensees are required to provide the New York State Housing and Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form to every consumer at first substantive contact beginning on June 20th. First substantive contact is the same standard used for presentation of the agency disclosure form. Licensees must use the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form issued by DOS. The Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form can be found at the following link. The Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form advises consumers of substantive provisions of the New York State human rights law. It also sets forth how human rights law complaints may be filed. Must a licensee provide the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form to current clients and customers on June 20th if first substantive contact occurred before the June 20th effective date? DOS has stated that license holders that have already established first substantive contact prior to the regulation's effective date are not required to obtain a late form. However, as a best practice, NYSAW recommends that licensees provide the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form to all customers and clients. What types of properties does the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form apply to? The Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form applies to any type of property. This includes residential, condominiums, co-ops, commercial, unimproved real property, vacant land, and new construction. There are no exceptions. Brokers must be sure to have the form ready to be disseminated to all prospective clients and consumers starting on June 20th. In what manner can a licensee present the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form? The Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form can be presented to the seller, landlord, prospective buyer, or tenant by email, text, electronic messaging system, fax, or hard copy. Any electronic communication can contain a link to the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form as long as the electronic communication contains text that informs the consumer that the link contains information regarding the New York State human rights law. Oral disclosure does not satisfy the requirements. Must the licensee have the consumer sign the anti-discrimination disclosure form? The answer is yes, but only if provided by hard copy or electronic signature. The licensee is required to obtain a signed acknowledgement from the seller, landlord, prospective buyer, or tenant. But if delivered by electronic means that does not permit electronic signature, then the signed anti-discrimination disclosure form is not required, but proof of electronic delivery must be kept by the broker. Does a licensee need to keep a copy of the anti-discrimination disclosure form provided to consumers? Yes, for a period of not less than 3 years. If the consumer signed a hard copy, the signed anti-discrimination disclosure form must be retained. If the consumer signed electronically, such electronically signed document must be retained. If provided by other electronic means, a duplicate copy must be retained. NYSAR recommends retaining proof of transmission, copy of the email, text, fax delivery confirmation, or other means to prove that the anti-discrimination disclosure form was provided. What should a licensee do if a consumer refuses to sign the anti-discrimination disclosure form? The regulation provides for the same procedure if a consumer refuses to sign the agency disclosure form. If the consumer refuses to sign the anti-discrimination disclosure form, the licensee shall set forth under oath or affirmation a written declaration of the facts regarding when such notice was provided and shall maintain a copy of the declaration for no less than 3 years. LIBOR's created a declaration form you can use for this purpose. You can find it on Documents on Demand in the legal section under Declaration that licensee provided the New York State Housing and Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form. And here's a copy of the sworn declaration. Next, I would like to turn it over to Patrick to talk about the Fair Housing Notice.
Thank you, Doreen. A copy of the Fair Housing Notice that's required by the new regulations is provided below. This form is different than the anti-discrimination disclosure form that Doreen just spoke about. The new Fair Housing regulations require every real estate broker to display the Fair Housing Notice at every office or branch office operated by the broker. Brokers must use the Fair Housing Notice issued by Department of State. The Fair Housing Notice is different than the New York State Housing and Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form that Doreen spoke about. The requirements to comply with the Fair Housing Notice are also different than the requirements to comply with the Anti-Discrimination Disclosure Form. You can find the Fair Housing Notice on the Department of State's website, and we've provided a link on the screen. What are the requirements to comply with the Fair Housing Notice? As stated before, every real estate broker must display the Fair Housing Notice at every office and branch office operated by the broker. The Fair Housing Notice must be prominently displayed in the window of such office and any branch office maintained by the broker if such broker also provides listings or other postings in the window of such location, and must be visible to persons on the portion of the sidewalk adjacent to such office or branch office. If any office or branch office is not accessible from the sidewalk, or if postings are otherwise prohibited by any other applicable law, then the Fair Housing Notice must be prominently posted in the same location the business license is posted. Must a licensee display the Fair Housing Notice anywhere else? The answer is yes. A real estate broker, licensed real estate salesperson, or licensed associate broker must display the fair housing notice at all open houses of real property. The fair housing notice should be displayed in an area where all attendees at the open house will see it, and such display should be conspicuous. Additional copies of the fair housing notice should be available at open houses to provide to consumers when requested. In addition, all websites of the broker and brokers affiliated licensees must contain the fair housing notice. How must a licensee display the fair housing notice on its website? All websites created and maintained by real estate brokers, associate real estate brokers, real estate salespersons, and any real estate team must prominently and conspicuously display on the homepage of such website a link to the fair housing notice provided by the Department of State. This would include websites like Facebook and Instagram if a licensee has created pages with any advertising on those platforms. To satisfy the requirement of prominently and conspicuously displaying the link, the licensee must put the link above the fold so a consumer does not have to scroll down the web page to find the link. Again, the link is on the Department of State's website, and we've provided it here in the slides as well. Does a licensee need to provide the fair housing notice to consumers? Licensees are not required to provide the fair housing notice to consumers like they are required to provide the anti-discrimination disclosure form. However, the new regulations require that licensees conducting an open house or showing must have the fair housing notice available and provide a copy if requested by the consumer. So licensees must have copies of the fair housing notice ready for distribution out in the field as of June 20th. I also want to briefly talk about the video recording and record preservation requirements for fair housing and real estate instruction that are part of the new regulations. The new regulations also include a requirement that all entities providing courses approved by the Department of State must record courses pertaining to fair housing and/or discrimination in the sale or rental of real property or an interest in real property in its entirety. The entity providing the course must record both video and audio. The recording must be maintained for at least 1 year after the course was provided, and the recording is subject to any audit by the Department of State. We've also provided links to local and state fair housing agencies that provide more information regarding fair housing and fair housing regulation. Links are provided to the New York State Division of Human Rights, the New York State Attorney General, the Suffolk County Human Rights Commission, the Nassau County Human Rights Commission, and Fair Housing NYC. Finally, we'd like to remind you that members of LIBOR can call the New York State Association of Realtors at 518-43-NYSAR with general legal questions. NYSAR's legal hotline is a free member benefit and is available from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, excluding holidays and during official NYSAR functions. This concludes our presentation, and we thank you for listening.
Thank you.